Hello there, and welcome to Midnight Geography. Tonight, we'll drift into Earth's quieter truths, those patient facts that accumulate like sediment. Geography is time made visible, the planet's memory written in stone, water, and wind. It speaks in measurements we rarely notice, the millimeter rise of mountains, the centimeter drift of continents. Every landscape tells a story of waiting, of processes so slow they make human history seem frantic. If you enjoy these peaceful geographical explorations, consider liking and subscribing. It helps other curious minds find their way here too. But for now, let's begin. Centralia, Pennsylvania, has been quietly burning beneath its streets since 1962, when a coal seam deep underground caught fire and never stopped. The town once thrived with 2,000 residents, their lives built above rich anthracite deposits that powered America's industrial age. Now only 5 people remain, refusing to leave despite government buyouts and demolition orders. Smoke rises from cracks in the abandoned highway, which buckled and split from the heat below. The ground temperature reaches 900 degrees Fahrenheit in places, hot enough to melt the soles off shoes. Snow never settles on certain patches of earth. Steam rises year-round from fissures that appeared in backyards where children once played. The fire spreads through the coal veins at about 75 feet per year, following the underground maze of mining tunnels carved over centuries. Scientists estimate it has enough fuel to burn for another 250 years, longer than the United States has existed as a nation. Nature reclaims the empty streets slowly. Deer wander through what was downtown. Trees grow through living room floors, and the underground fire continues its patient consumption, a geological clock ticking with flame instead of gears. Vostok Station in Antarctica holds the record for Earth's coldest natural temperature, minus 89.2 degrees Celsius, measured on July 21, 1983. At this temperature, human breath crystallizes instantly and falls to the ground as ice dust. Scientists working here must breathe through masks to warm incoming air, as lung tissue can freeze from direct exposure. The station sits 3,488 meters above sea level on the East Antarctic ice sheet, where ice extends 3,700 meters down to the bedrock below. In winter, the station becomes unreachable for 8 months. No aircraft can land in such cold, their hydraulic fluids turning solid. The dozen people who winter here exist in deeper isolation than astronauts on the International Space Station. Water boils at 86 degrees Celsius due to the altitude, but freezes the moment it's thrown into the air, creating a cloud of ice crystals that drift away like manufactured snow. The aurora australis dances overhead during the polar night, but few venture outside to watch. Exposed skin freezes in under a minute. Even inside the heated station, ice forms on interior walls, growing like a slow crystal garden that must be regularly scraped away. Peru's boiling river runs through the Amazon rainforest at temperatures that defy explanation, maintaining 86 degrees Celsius for 6.4 kilometers of its length. The Mayantuyaku, as locals call it, kills anything that falls into its waters within seconds. Unfortunate animals become ghostly white as they're cooked from the inside out. The river's source remains mysterious. It sits 700 kilometers from any volcanic activity, too far for magma to explain its heat. Geologists suspect a complex system of faults channels geothermal energy from deep within Earth's crust, but the exact mechanism stays hidden beneath the jungle canopy. Steam rises constantly through the trees, creating its own microclimate where certain plants thrive in the perpetual sauna. Shamans have used these waters for centuries, considering the river a sacred serpent spirit that breathes vapor into the forest. the water tastes of sulfur and minerals drawn from depths no one has measured. During the rainy season, cold tributaries join the flow, creating pockets where temperature drops just enough for brief, dangerous swimming. At night, the steam glows in moonlight, a river of clouds flowing at ground level through darkness that seems solid as stone. Lake Retba in Senegal glows pink under the African sun, its waters colored by Dunaliella salina algae that produce beta-carotene to survive the extreme salinity. The lake contains 40% salt, higher than the Dead Sea, allowing salt harvesters to float effortlessly while they work. Men stand chest-deep for hours, scraping salt from the bottom with long poles, their skin protected by shea butter that must be reapplied constantly, or the brine will burn through to muscle. Mountains of white salt line the shores, each pile representing days of labor in water that would kill most life forms. The pink intensifies during dry season when evaporation concentrates both salt and algae. Women carry 50-kilogram baskets of salt on their heads, balanced perfectly as they walk the narrow paths between evaporation pools. The lake separated from the Atlantic Ocean centuries ago, gradually becoming saltier as fresh water evaporated and ocean memory crystallized. Fish that survived the transition evolved rapidly. What took millions of years elsewhere happened here in decades, evolution compressed by extreme conditions into visible time. Surtsey Island emerged from the North Atlantic on November 14, 1963, born in steam and fire as underwater volcanic eruptions broke the surface off Iceland's coast. Within 3 years, it grew to 2.7 square kilometers. Then wind and waves began their slow dismantling. Scientists declared it a natural laboratory, restricting access to observe how life colonizes virgin land. The first plant appeared in 1965, a sea rocket that arrived as a seed on ocean currents. Seals began breeding on the Black Beaches in 1983, their waste fertilizing soil that didn't exist when their parents were born. Now, 60 years later, the island has shrunk by half, eroding at about 1 hectare per year. Only scientists may land here, and they must search their clothes for seeds to avoid contaminating the experiment. Earthworms appeared mysteriously in 1993, probably arriving in soil on a researcher's boot despite precautions. The island demonstrates colonization in fast forward, mosses covering lava, grasses taking root in volcanic ash, birds nesting where molten rock cooled just decades ago. Eventually, probably within 100 years, Surtsey will disappear beneath the waves, its brief existence recorded only in scientific papers and Icelandic memory. The Bermuda Triangle encompasses 500,000 square miles of ocean between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, where magnetic anomalies cause compass variations of up to 20 degrees. Ships and aircraft have disappeared here in good weather with no distress calls, leaving speculation but few facts. The ocean floor drops suddenly from continental shelf to abyssal depths, creating powerful currents and unpredictable weather. Methane hydrates trapped in sediment occasionally release massive gas bubbles that could theoretically reduce water density enough to sink ships instantly. The Gulf Stream races through at 4 knots, quickly dispersing wreckage and bodies far from disappearance sites. Electronic fog has been reported by pilots, grayish clouds that seem to rotate around aircraft, causing instrument malfunction and time distortion. Yet statistics show no more disappearances here than in similarly traveled ocean areas. The mystery persists, partly because the human mind seeks patterns, finding significance in random tragedy. Still, commercial pilots often report their instruments spinning wildly when crossing certain coordinates, and ships' logs describe compass needles pointing true south instead of north. as if the planet's magnetic field briefly inverts in pockets of disturbed space. Lake Nyos in Cameroon released an invisible cloud of carbon dioxide on August 21, 1986, suffocating 1,746 people and 3,500 livestock within minutes. The lake sits in a volcanic crater where CO2 seeps from magma below and dissolves in the deep water under pressure. Something triggered the lake to suddenly overturn, perhaps a landslide, unusual rainfall, or temperature change, releasing 1.6 million tons of gas in an eruption survivors described as sounding like gunfire. The gas cloud, heavier than air, flowed down valleys at 50 kilometers per hour, displacing oxygen up to 25 kilometers from the lake. Victims simply stopped breathing, many dying in their sleep without waking. Survivors described the air smelling of rotten eggs or gunpowder, then losing consciousness for up to 36 hours. Today, pipes siphon gas-rich water from the depths, creating fountains that release CO2 safely, but the lake still holds dangerous quantities of dissolved gas. The water remains clear and calm, giving no indication of its lethal potential. Local legends had warned of evil spirits in the lake for generations, ancestral wisdom that science validated too late. Beneath the Amazon River flows another river, the Hamza, moving through porous rock 4,000 meters below the surface. This underground flow stretches 6,000 kilometers, roughly the Amazon's length, but crawls at just a few centimeters per year compared to the surface river's meters per second. Water takes centuries to complete the journey that the Amazon makes in months. The Hamza runs wider than the Amazon, up to 400 kilometers across in places, but carries only 3,900 cubic meters per second, a trickle compared to the Amazon's 209,000 cubic meters. Scientists discovered it by analyzing temperature variations in oil wells drilled decades ago, finding patterns that indicated water movement far below where any river should exist. The two rivers flow in the same direction, twins separated by layers of rock and time, one racing through rainforest while the other seeps through stone. This hidden river might connect to the Atlantic through submarine springs, fresh water emerging from the seafloor far from land. The discovery suggests Earth hides entire water systems in its depths, shadow rivers flowing beneath the ones we know, carrying ancient rain that fell when humans were just learning to use fire. Paricutin volcano grew from a Mexican cornfield starting February 20, 1943, when farmer Dionisio Pulido noticed the ground warming beneath his plow. By evening, a cone 6 meters high was throwing lava bombs across his field. Within a week, it reached 100 meters. Within a year, 336 meters. The volcano buried the villages of Paricutin and San Juan Parangaricutiro, only the church tower of the latter still visible above the lava field. Residents had time to evacuate but watched their entire world disappear beneath volcanic ash and molten rock. For 9 years, the volcano erupted continuously, building a cone 424 meters high before suddenly stopping in 1952, never to erupt again. Scientists arrived to witness something rarely seen: a volcano's complete life cycle from birth to death. The church that survived became a pilgrimage site, its nave filled with hardened lava, altar buried beneath rock that was liquid when it arrived. Today, tourists climb the dead volcano, walking on rocks younger than many of their parents. The cornfield where it began lies hundreds of meters below, along with the lives that were lived there, preserved in stone that didn't exist when those lives were being planned. The Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland consists of 40,000 interlocking basalt columns, formed when lava met the sea 60 million years ago. The columns, mostly hexagonal, fit together like a vast stone honeycomb, extending from cliff base into the ocean. Rapid cooling created the geometric perfection, Physics determining that hexagons release heat most efficiently, nature choosing mathematics without consciousness. Legend claims the giant Finn McCool built it as stepping stones to Scotland to fight another giant. Similar columns exist on the Scottish island of Staffa, suggesting the myth preserves geological truth. These were once connected before the sea claimed the bridge between. Each column represents a single cooling event, lava contracting and cracking with clockwork precision. Some columns reach 12 meters high, others barely break the surface, creating natural stairs and platforms where seabirds nest. The formation continues underwater, a drowned cathedral of stone pillars where fish swim through geological geometry. Waves have polished the exposed tops smooth over millennia, while new sections occasionally collapse, revealing fresh faces with edges sharp enough to cut. Tourists climb these ancient steps, unaware they're walking on frozen time, each footfall on stones that remember when Ireland was volcanic. Angel Falls in Venezuela plunges 979 meters from Ollantaytambo Tepuy Mountain, the water falling so far it often evaporates before reaching the ground. During dry season, the falls become a ghost of moisture, a suggestion of water that dissipates into mist halfway down. The indigenous Paman people knew it as Karapakupai Meru, waterfall of the deepest place. Long before American aviator Jimmy Angel crashed his plane on the Tepuy in 1937, giving it the name the world knows. The water begins as rain on the mountain's flat summit, gathering in streams that suddenly find themselves at the world's edge. The first 807 meters fall uninterrupted, the longest single drop on Earth, before hitting a sloped ledge and falling another 172 meters. From below, the falls appear to emerge from clouds, the Tepuy's summit usually hidden in mist that the waterfall seems to generate through its own violence. In wet season, the thunder of water can be heard kilometers away, but reaching the base requires a 2-day river journey through jungle. The spray creates its own rainbow ecosystem at the base, where plants live in perpetual mist, never fully wet, never fully dry. The chocolate hills of Bohol in the Philippines spread across 50 square kilometers, 1,776 cone-shaped mounds that turn brown during dry season like enormous chocolate drops. These limestone hills, ranging from 30 to 120 meters high, formed from coral deposits uplifted from the seafloor and sculpted by rainwater over millennia. Their remarkable uniformity suggests consistent weathering conditions over geological time, each hill shaped by the same patient forces. During rainy season, grass covers them in green, but when drought comes, the vegetation dies back to brown, creating the chocolate appearance that gives them their name. Legend tells of 2 giants who fought for days, hurling boulders at each other until exhausted, they became friends and left, forgetting to clean their mess. No trees grow on the hills, only grass and ferns, possibly due to the thin soil and limestone base. Between the hills lie flat valleys where rice grows, farmers working fields, surrounded by what looks like a child's drawing of mountains. From the viewing platform, the hills extend to the horizon, their perfect spacing and similar heights creating an oddly artificial appearance, as if nature attempted to impose order on chaos and nearly succeeded. Thor's Well on the Oregon coast creates a seemingly bottomless sinkhole that appears to drain the Pacific Ocean during high tide. This natural feature, also called the Gate to Hell, formed when sea caves carved from basalt collapsed, creating a bowl about 20 feet deep connected to the ocean through underwater channels. At high tide, waves surge into the hole from below, shooting water spouts up to 20 feet high. During optimal conditions, high tide with strong ocean swells, the well appears to breathe, inhaling ocean water then violently exhaling it in explosive fountains. Between surges, water drains back through the same channels, creating the illusion of a drain in the ocean floor. The formation sits in an area of volcanic basalt, created by the same flows that formed much of the Oregon coast. Photographers risk their lives for the perfect shot, waves occasionally sweeping people from the surrounding rocks. The indigenous Alsea people avoided this place, their stories warning of its dangers. At low tide, the illusion breaks. It's just a hole in rock. But when conditions align, Thor's well seems to reveal an opening to the ocean's basement, a portal that swallows ships and souls with equal indifference. New Zealand's Moeraki boulders scatter along Koikohe Beach like giant marbles abandoned by titans. These spherical rocks, some weighing several tons and measuring 2 meters across, formed on the seafloor 60 million years ago through a process called concretion. Minerals gradually cemented around a core, perhaps a shell or bone fragment, building layers like a pearl, but with stone instead of nacre. Erosion freed them from softer mudstone cliffs, leaving them stranded on the beach like geological orphans. Some have cracked open, revealing hollow centers with golden crystals of calcite that catch sunlight like treasure. Maori legend describes them as gourds and fishing nets from the ancestral canoe Araitiru, washed ashore after a wreck. The scientific explanation seems equally fantastic. These perfect spheres formed by chance, minerals precipitating evenly in all directions over millions of years. Similar formations exist worldwide, but nowhere as accessible or numerous. Each tide shifts them slightly, these multi-ton spheres moving like pebbles in the surf. Tourists pose with them at sunrise when the light makes them glow, unaware they're touching objects that began forming when dinosaurs still walked the earth. Uluru rises from Australia's red center like a sleeping giant's back, 348 meters above ground, but extending 2.5 kilometers below, an iceberg of stone in reverse. This monolith, sacred to the Anangu people for 30,000 years, changes color through the day. Gray at dawn, burning red at sunset, purple in rain. The rock consists of Arcos sandstone turned vertical by geological forces, its surface riddled with caves, springs, and waterholes that support life in the desert. Iron oxidizing on its surface creates the red color, rust on a continental scale. Rain transforms Uluru into something alien. Waterfalls cascade down surfaces that stay dry for months, creating temporary rivers that vanish within hours. The rock holds heat from the day, creating updrafts that generate their own weather, sometimes causing rain to fall on Uluru while surrounding desert remains dry. Climbing was banned in 2019, respecting Anangu wishes, though the chain handrail remains, slowly being absorbed by the rock's chemistry. From the air, Uluru reveals itself as just the largest of many rock formations in the area, but from ground level, it dominates the horizon, a singular presence that seems to bend space around itself. Chile's marble caves exist only by boat access, carved from solid marble by 6,000 years of waves in General Carrera Lake. The Marble Peninsula, formed from limestone metamorphosed by geological heat and pressure, juts into waters that change from turquoise to deep blue with glacial melt seasons. Light filtering through the water reflects off the smooth marble walls, creating a natural cathedral of shifting blues and greens. The cave's colors intensify on sunny days when light penetrates deeper, illuminating mineral veins that streak the marble like frozen lightning. The lake itself, shared with Argentina, where it's called Lake Buenos Aires, spans 1,150 square kilometers, its waters so clear you can see tens of meters down. Accessing the caves requires a boat journey across waters that can turn violent within minutes, as Patagonian winds funnel through mountain passes. The marble continues underwater, suggesting more caves exist below, unreachable except by diving in waters just above freezing. Each year, waves carve a little deeper, creating new chambers while destroying others, the sculpture never complete. Local Tehuelche peoples considered these caves sacred, believing spirits lived in the colored light that dances on marble walls. Canada's Spotted Lake reveals itself during summer evaporation, when water loss exposes 365 separate pools of highly concentrated minerals, one for each day of the year, according to legend. This endorheic lake near Osoyoos contains extreme concentrations of magnesium sulfate, calcium, and sodium sulfates, along with silver, titanium, and other minerals. As water evaporates, these minerals crystallize, creating barriers between pools that range in color from blue to green to yellow, depending on mineral composition. During World War I, minerals from the lake were harvested for ammunition manufacturing. Tons of raw materials shipped to eastern Canadian factories. The Syilx Okanagan peoples know it as Kliluk, a sacred medicine lake where warring tribes would declare truce to allow all sides to bathe their wounds. Walking on the lake during dry periods means stepping on mineral deposits that crunch underfoot like snow, though these crystals formed from evaporation rather than freezing. Each pool maintains different chemistry, some so alkaline they'd burn skin, others nearly neutral, creating a patchwork of chemical environments in an area smaller than a soccer field. From the highway overlook, the lake resembles a giant's watercolor palette, nature's pointillism in mineral form. Jeju Island emerged from the Korean seafloor through volcanic eruptions beginning 2 million years ago, building South Korea's highest peak, Hallasan, which still shows its volcanic heritage through 360 parasitic cones dotting the island. These smaller volcanic vents, called orium in local dialect, create a landscape of gentle hills, each representing a single eruption event when lava found a new path to the surface. The island's volcanic soil, combined with subtropical climate, supports plants found nowhere else in Korea. Lava tubes run beneath the island like a subway system designed by geology, the Manjangul tube stretching 13 kilometers, one of the longest in the world. Inside these tubes, lava stalactites hang from ceilings, formed not by dripping water but by molten rock that cooled while flowing. The island's isolation created unique cultural developments too, a matriarchal society of women divers, Henyo, who free dive for seafood in waters that would paralyze most swimmers. Black volcanic rock defines the architecture, walls built from basalt so porous that wind whistles through, creating songs that change with wind direction. UNESCO recognizes the entire island as a geological park, where visitors walk on rocks younger than human civilization. The Kamchatka Peninsula hosts 160 volcanoes in an area roughly the size of California, with 29 currently active, making it Earth's most volcanically dense region. This Russian peninsula exists where the Pacific Plate dives beneath the North American Plate, recycling seafloor into magma that rises as volcanic fire. The Valley of Geysers, accessible only by helicopter, contains the world's second largest concentration of geysers, all discovered only in 1941 because of the region's remoteness. Brown bears here have learned to bathe in hot springs, the world's only population of thermal bathing bears. The volcanoes create their own weather, steam plumes that become clouds, dropping acidic rain that steals color from the landscape, except where thermophile bacteria paint rocks in impossible reds and yellows. Some volcanoes erupt continuously but gently, approachable enough that volcanologists camp on their slopes, while others explode with violence that reshapes entire valleys. Snow and fire coexist constantly. Glaciers run down volcanic slopes, creating landscapes where ice caves fill with volcanic steam. The indigenous Even people navigate by volcano peaks, each mountain a compass point in their mental. Maps, their reindeer avoiding ground that might suddenly crack open with new fumaroles. The Altiplano Plateau stretches across Peru and Bolivia at 3,750 meters average elevation, Earth's most extensive high plateau outside Tibet, where the air contains 40% less oxygen than at sea level. This ancient seabed, lifted skyward by tectonic collision, hosts lakes that shouldn't exist and deserts that bloom. Lake Titicaca, the world's highest navigable lake, preserves endemic species like the Titicaca water frog, which breathes through skin so folded it resembles a wool sweater. The plateau experiences temperature swings of 40 degrees Celsius between day and night, sunshine intense enough to burn through closed eyes, while shadows provide no intermediate temperature, only extremes. Quinoa originated here, one of few crops that tolerate such altitude, along with potatoes so varied that some villages grow 200 distinct types. Flamingos feed in mineral lakes that would kill most birds, their bodies filtering toxins that would destroy other kidneys. The Uyuni salt flats spread across the southern plateau, remnants of prehistoric lakes that evaporated in air too thin to hold moisture. Vicuñas, wild relatives of llamas, graze on grass that grows in tufts, each plant a fortress against wind that never stops. Human bodies adapt over generations. Enlarged lungs, more red blood cells, hearts that beat differently than lowlanders' hearts. The Pantanal wetland spreads across Brazil, Bolivia, and Paraguay like Earth's largest sponge, covering 195,000 square kilometers that transform with the seasons. During the October to March rains, 80% of this vast plain disappears underwater, creating a temporary inland sea larger than England and Wales combined. Then, the water retreats, leaving behind thousands of pools where caimans concentrate in such numbers that their backs form living bridges. This annual flood pulse drives one of the planet's most spectacular concentrations of wildlife, 10 million caimans, the world's largest jaguar population, giant otters stretching 2 meters long, and 650 species of birds that arrive in clouds so dense they darken the noon sky. The wetland acts as a massive filter, cleaning water that flows eventually to the Atlantic, removing sediments and pollutants through nature's own treatment system. Cowboys called pantaneros have worked these floods for generations, moving cattle to higher ground when waters rise. Their knowledge of subtle landscape changes meaning survival. Trees here wear high water marks like bathtub rings, showing floods from decades past. The Transpantanera Road attempts to cross this wetness on bridges and embankments, but nature wins annually, water finding ways around human ambition, reclaiming the land for 6 months each year. Lake Turkana in Kenya contains Central Island, where 3 crater lakes exist within the island itself, creating a Russian doll arrangement of water bodies, lakes within an island, within a lake. This jade-colored lake, the world's largest permanent desert lake, sits in the Great Rift Valley, where humanity itself may have begun. The water maintains an alkaline pH that supports little life except specialized algae and the fish that evolved to tolerate it. Central Island's crater lakes each maintain different chemistry, different colors, different mysteries. One glows green, another brown, the third black as oil, each colored by its own combination of minerals and microorganisms. Crocodiles nest in the volcanic sand, the world's largest remaining concentration of Nile crocodiles, some growing over 6 meters long, unchanged since the age of dinosaurs. The lake has no outlet, depending entirely on Ethiopia's Omo River, which brings 90% of its water. Climate change and upstream dams threaten this balance, the lake level dropping yearly, exposing ancient shorelines like growth rings in reverse. The Turkana people call it the Jade Sea, though its color shifts from blue to gray to green, depending on algae blooms triggered by winds that can generate waves 4 meters high on this inland sea. The Simpson Desert spreads its parallel sand dunes across central Australia for 200 kilometers, each dune running perfectly straight from northwest to southeast, aligned by winds that blew consistently for thousands of years. These red sand ridges, some reaching 40 meters high, create a corduroy landscape visible from space, nature's own lined notebook written in sand and time. Between the dunes lie clay pans that briefly fill with water after rare rains, triggering explosions of life, fairy shrimp that complete entire life cycles in weeks, seeds that waited years suddenly sprouting. The sand itself tells stories, each grain coated in iron oxide that took millennia to form, the redness indicating age like rust on cosmic scales. Early explorers tried counting the dunes to navigate, losing count after 600, eventually realizing the pattern continues beyond human patience. Dingoes traverse the dunes along the same paths their ancestors used, creating tracks that last until the next wind. In certain lights, the dunes appear to breathe, shadows moving across their faces as the sun arcs overhead, the entire desert seeming to inhale and exhale in geological time. Plants grow only on the dune crests, where water briefly accumulates, thin lines of green stitching the red ridges together. Tierra del Fuego, the land of fire, splits between Chile and Argentina along a ruler-straight border that ignores mountains, rivers, and common sense, running due south from the Strait of Magellan to Cape Horn's vicinity. This arbitrary line, drawn by treaty in 1881, gives Argentina the Atlantic side, Chile the Pacific, creating administrative absurdities where shepherds must carry passports to move sheep between pastures. The island earned its name from indigenous fires that early explorers saw from their ships, smoke columns rising from a land they assumed volcanic. Those fires are gone now, along with the Selknam people who tended them, extinguished by European diseases and deliberate genocide. Wind defines life here more than the border. Trees grow horizontal, sculpted by gales that average 100 kilometers per hour, creating natural bonsai forests where trunks run parallel to the ground before turning skyward. Guanacos leap the border fence without knowing nations exist, while condors ride thermals that recognize no human boundaries. The island narrows toward the south, funneling winds into velocities that stopped sailing ships for weeks. Ushuaia claims the title of world's southernmost city on the Argentine side, while Chile maintains Puerto Williams across the Beagle Channel, each nation claiming their own interpretation of southernmost. The Drake Passage churns between Cape Horn and Antarctica, 800 kilometers of open water where waves build uninterrupted for 600 miles, the longest fetch on Earth. No land breaks these swells as they circle the globe on the roaring 40s and furious 50s latitudes, building into liquid mountains that regularly reach 15 meters, occasionally doubling that. Ships either race through in the brief calm windows or endure punishment that tests steel and human endurance equally. The Antarctic circumpolar current pushes 140 million cubic meters of water per second through this gap, more than all the world's rivers combined, the planet's mightiest current squeezing between continents. Icebergs drift north into the passage, medieval castles of ice meeting waves that have traveled from New Zealand without interruption. Albatrosses patrol these waters with 3-meter wingspans, riding winds that never stop, sometimes circling the globe without touching land. Sailors know the Drake Shake from the Drake Lake, either nature's violence or suspicious calm that feels like a trap. The passage marks the biological boundary between ecosystems, where subtropical waters meet Antarctic seas, creating upwellings that support massive populations of krill, the foundation of Antarctic food webs. Even modern ships with stabilizers respect these waters, where 19th century sailing vessels simply disappeared. South Georgia Island rises from the Southern Ocean like a 170-kilometer-long wall of ice and rock, hosting 450,000 breeding pairs of king penguins, more than exist in all other colonies combined. These birds create a living carpet of black, white, and orange that covers entire valleys, their collective calls creating a sound that resembles industrial machinery running constantly. Each penguin recognizes its partner and chick among hundreds of thousands by voice alone, finding their family in crowds that would defeat any human attempt at reunion. The island has no permanent residents, only scientists and officials who rotate through, outnumbered by wildlife at ratios that border on absurd. Elephant seals breed here in such numbers that beaches disappear under tons of blubber, males fighting for territory with violence that shakes the ground. Glaciers pour directly into the sea from mountains that trap moisture from the roaring 40s, creating waterfalls of ice that calve icebergs daily. Ernest Shackleton crossed these mountains in 1916 seeking rescue for his stranded crew, a journey considered impossible until he proved otherwise through desperation. Introduced reindeer, brought by Norwegian whalers, were recently eliminated after eating native plants to extinction on parts of the island. The surrounding waters host such quantities of krill that blue whales, nearly extinct from whaling, slowly return to feed. Franz Josef Land Archipelago exists as 191 ice-covered islands in the Arctic Ocean, 85% glaciated, with no permanent population above 80 degrees north latitude except for rotating military and scientific personnel. These islands, discovered only in 1873, remain so remote that polar bears often outnumber humans, treating abandoned Soviet-era buildings as dens. The ice cap covering most islands reaches 500 meters thick, flowing slowly toward the sea, calving icebergs that drift south into shipping lanes. During the brief Arctic summer, exposed rock reveals fossil forests from when this land sat in temperate latitudes, before continental drift carried it to the world's frozen crown. Soviet nuclear testing here left some islands contaminated, their radiation locked in ice that climate change now threatens to release. Walruses haul out in thousands on the few ice-free beaches, their combined weight actually depressing the shoreline. The islands form stepping stones between Eurasia and the pole, used by migrating birds that somehow navigate through polar night and magnetic confusion. Names on maps read like failed ambitions: Cape Disappointment, False Bay, Misery Point, christened by explorers who found ice where they hoped for open water. The archipelago continues emerging from the sea as post-glacial rebound lifts land freed from ice weight, rising a few millimeters annually. Jan Mayen Island stretches like a barbell in the Norwegian Sea, two landmasses connected by a 2.5-kilometer-wide isthmus, with Beerenberg Volcano on the northeastern end, rising 2,277 meters directly from the ocean. This volcano, Norway's only active one, hides beneath clouds 360 days a year, its summit glacier-covered despite regular eruptions, the latest in 1985. 18 people staff the weather station year-round, the island's only inhabitants, measuring conditions where Arctic and Atlantic air masses collide. No trees grow here, no bushes, only Arctic poppies and moss clinging to volcanic soil between lava flows of different ages. Black rock recording eruptions in layers like a geological diary. Arctic foxes arrived on ice floes and established a population that survives on seabirds and whatever washes ashore. The island generates its own weather, forcing air up its volcanic slopes where it cools and drops moisture, creating more precipitation than surrounding ocean areas. Dutch whalers used it as a base in the 1600s, leaving graves where permafrost preserved bodies so well that archaeologists could determine causes of death centuries later. The island sits on the mid-Atlantic ridge, technically growing wider as seafloor spreading continues, though volcanic eruptions add height faster than width. The Kuril Islands form a 1 to 300 kilometer volcanic arc between Japan and Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula, 56 islands with a combined population of just 20,000 people, mostly concentrated on the 4 southernmost islands. These islands change nationality like shuffled cards: Japanese, Russian, Japanese again, then Soviet, now Russian, with Japan still claiming the southern 4. Each island represents a volcano, active or dormant, part of the Ring of Fire, where the Pacific Plate subducts beneath the Eurasian Plate. Sea otters float between islands wrapped in kelp to avoid drifting away while sleeping, nearly extinct elsewhere but thriving in these contested waters. The islands create a barrier between the Sea of Okhotsk and the Pacific, channels between them generating currents so powerful that ships wait for slack tide to pass safely. Volcanic activity continues reshaping the chain. New islands appear, others grow. Some sink back beneath waves. Brown bears swim between islands, establishing populations that diverge genetically over mere centuries. Military installations rot on various islands, abandoned when strategic value shifted, now used as shelter by foxes and nesting sites by seabirds. Fog shrouds the chain 200 days annually, navigation so difficult that shipwrecks litter the seafloor, creating artificial reefs where king crabs grow to unusual sizes. Sakhalin Island extends 948 kilometers north to south, but narrows to just 6 kilometers at the Novelski Strait, nearly splitting into 2 separate islands. This near break creates different climates on either side. The northern portion Arctic-like, while the south supports deciduous forests. The Trans-Siberian Railway was planned to cross here, engineers dreaming of bridges that never materialized, leaving Sakhalin accessible only by ferry or air. Oil and natural gas deposits offshore have transformed the island's economy, platforms visible from beaches where indigenous Nivk people still fish for salmon as their ancestors did. The island served as a Russian penal colony, then split between Russia and Japan, then wholly Soviet, each transition leaving architectural ghosts, wooden Orthodox churches, concrete Soviet blocks, traces of Japanese settlements. Tectonic forces continue trying to tear Sakhalin apart at its narrow waist, earthquakes common as the island sits where multiple plates meet. Salmon runs here remain among the world's largest, rivers turning silver with fish that Pacific bears, found nowhere else in Russia, have learned to catch. The narrowest point floods during storm surges, Pacific and Okhotsk seas, briefly joining, a preview of the island's eventual division. Reindeer herders in the north can see lights from oil platforms in the south, traditional and modern existing on the same narrow strip. North Sentinel Island in the Andaman Archipelago hosts the world's last uncontacted people, the Sentinelese, who have rejected all outside contact for an estimated 60,000 years. The island spans just 72 square kilometers, surrounded by coral reefs that make approach dangerous, a natural fortress protecting its inhabitants. The Indian government declares the island sovereign, laws prohibiting approach within 3 nautical miles, making the Sentinelese perhaps the most isolated humans on Earth. They attack anyone who lands, greeting helicopters with arrows, maintaining isolation through violence when natural barriers fail. Population estimates range from 40 to 400, but nobody knows, Aerial surveys show clearings and fires, but reveal little about numbers. The 2004 tsunami raised questions about their survival, but helicopter reconnaissance confirmed they had moved inland before the wave struck, their indigenous knowledge predicting what seismographs missed. Their language remains unknown, unrelated to other Andamanese languages, suggesting separation predating other human migrations. They build canoes, but only for lagoon fishing, never venturing to other islands, despite the shortest distance to neighboring islands being just 30 kilometers. Modern civilization surrounds them. Ships pass daily, aircraft fly overhead, yet they maintain Stone Age technology by choice, the last humans living as all humans once lived. The Lakshadweep Islands rest on coral atolls in the Arabian Sea with no point higher than 4 meters above sea level across all 36 islands, making them invisible until boats nearly run aground on their reefs. These islands exist as mere suggestions of land, coral growing just fast enough to match sea level, a race between biology and geology that coral has won for millennia, but climate change threatens to end. Fresh water exists only as a thin lens floating on salt water beneath the coral, trees sending roots precisely to this layer, too deep, and they hit salt, too shallow, and they dry. Coconut palms dominate, their salt tolerance allowing them to thrive where other trees die. The 65,000 inhabitants speak Malayalam, but have developed their own culture, isolated by 200 to 440 kilometers of ocean from India's mainland. Traditional navigation used stars, swells, and bird flights, sailors reading the ocean's patterns to find invisible islands. Fish appear in such numbers that traditional fishing uses coconut fronds to herd them into traps. Each island maintains slightly different traditions, micro-societies developing unique solutions to identical challenges. The coral beneath continues growing, adding millimeters yearly, but rising seas threaten to outpace growth, potentially erasing these islands within decades. Reunion Island's Piton de la Fournaise erupts on average every 9 months, making it one of Earth's most active volcanoes. Yet tourists picnic on lava flows from the previous year while watching new eruptions. This shield volcano on the French island creates what locals call the show. Eruptions gentle enough to approach but spectacular enough to draw crowds. The volcano has added 32 square kilometers to the island since humans arrived, lava flows reaching the ocean and building new land that vegetation colonizes within years. One side of the island receives 12 meters of rain annually, a world record, while the other side, in the rain shadow, resembles desert. The caldera collapses and rebuilds regularly, the landscape constantly reforming, roads rebuilt on top of roads buried by lava. Vanilla originated here, or at least was first cultivated commercially, the orchid requiring hand pollination since its natural pollinator doesn't exist on the island. French culture mixed with Creole, Indian, Chinese, and African influences created a unique society on this volcanic platform in the Indian Ocean. Scientists monitor the volcano continuously, one of the world's best studied eruption sites, yet it still surprises, sometimes opening new vents where none existed before. The island continues growing, each eruption adding volume, slowly rising from the ocean. The Chagos archipelago contains the Great Chagos Bank, the world's largest atoll structure at 12,642 square kilometers, mostly submerged with just a few islands breaking the surface. This ghost atoll exists mainly underwater, its outline visible from space as turquoise shallows in the deep blue Indian Ocean, a drowned kingdom of coral. The British forcibly removed all inhabitants in the 1970s to create a military base on Diego Garcia, leaving the other islands uninhabited, coconut plantations returning to jungle. The evicted Chagosians, now living in Mauritius and elsewhere, cannot return to their homeland. Their islands declared a marine reserve that excludes them but allows military operations. Coconut crabs, the world's largest land arthropods, have reclaimed the abandoned settlements, living in former homes. The surrounding waters host the healthiest coral reefs in the Indian Ocean, protected by isolation and the ironic conservation effect of military exclusion. Sea turtles nest on beaches they probably used before humans ever arrived, now free from interference. The archipelago sits at the geographic center of the Indian Ocean, equidistant from Africa, Asia, and Australia, strategic position trumping human rights. Britain promises to return the islands to Mauritius, but deadlines pass, promises break, and the islands remain empty, except for soldiers and ghosts. Christmas Island witnesses one of nature's most spectacular migrations when 43 million red crabs move simultaneously from forest to sea, turning roads into rivers of crimson movement. These crabs spend most of the year in the forest, but monsoon rains trigger their march to breed, following routes used for millennia. Roads close, special bridges span highways, and the entire island adapts to the crab's schedule. The crabs must reach the sea at precise times to release eggs during high tides, their timing so exact that scientists can predict migration dates months in advance. Yellow crazy ants, accidentally introduced, threaten this migration by spraying acid that blinds and kills crabs, an ecological disaster unfolding in slow motion. The island formed from volcanic seamount that coral eventually capped, creating phosphate deposits from millions of years of bird droppings. Mining for this phosphate shaped the island's human history, bringing Chinese and Malay workers who established communities. The crabs climb walls, fall from cliffs, cross golf courses, enter houses, nothing stopping their instinctive drive to reach the ocean. After breeding, they return to the forest, and weeks later, billions of baby crabs, each the size of a rice grain, emerge from the sea in a reverse migration, the island again turning red. Lord Howe Island limits visitors to 400 at any time, protecting an ecosystem where evolution ran experiments in isolation. The island's permanent population of 382 people lives among species found nowhere else. The Lord Howe Island stick insect, thought extinct, rediscovered on nearby Ball's Pyramid, and the endangered woodhen, a flightless bird that nearly vanished. The island formed from a shield volcano 7 million years ago, eroding to its current 10-kilometer length. Coral reefs here mark the world's southernmost true coral reef system, existing at the edge of possibility where cold currents meet warm. No predators existed before humans arrived. So many species lost defensive behaviors. Birds that don't flee, insects that don't hide. The island's ecology crashed when rats arrived from a shipwreck in 1918, but a recent eradication program removed them entirely, species recovering in real time. Mountains at the southern end trap clouds, creating a cloud forest where everything drips constantly while northern beaches stay dry. Visitors must pay an environmental levy and follow strict biosecurity protocols, shoes scrubbed, luggage inspected. The island demonstrates that tourism and conservation can coexist, but only through absolute control. Every sunset, mutton birds return from fishing, their calls filling darkness, the sound of an island that chose preservation over profit. The Chatham Islands emerge from the Pacific 800 kilometers east of New Zealand, first land on Earth to greet each new day. Their clocks 45 minutes ahead of New Zealand mainland, the world's most unusual time zone offset. This archipelago hosts the last survivors of the Moriori people, who developed a pacifist culture that proved fatal when Maori arrived in 1835, enslaving and killing most inhabitants. The islands support unique species evolved during isolation. The Chatham Island forget-me-not, with flowers larger than its mainland relatives, the Chatham Island pigeon. The black robin once reduced to 5 individuals. Wind shapes everything here. Trees grow horizontal. Sheep develop stronger muscles just to stand upright. Buildings require special anchoring. The islands export crayfish and paua to Asia, fishing boats working waters where the continental shelf drops to abyssal depths within sight of land. Fossilized shark teeth wash onto beaches, some from megalodon, remnants of oceans that existed before the islands emerged. The isolation creates self-reliance. Residents fix everything themselves. Medical emergencies require flights to New Zealand. Peat bogs preserve giant trees from ancient forests, wood so well preserved, it's still usable after thousands of years underground. The international dateline's proximity means residents joke about living in tomorrow, their morning radio broadcasts reaching New Zealand's yesterday. Stewart Island, New Zealand's third largest island, maintains a remarkable ratio of 15 residents per Kiwi bird, with just 400 humans sharing space with 20,000 of these nocturnal icons. The island remains 85% national park, where southern brown kiwi forage on beaches in daylight, unaware they're supposed to be nocturnal. This behavioral quirk developed because the island lacks stoats and ferrets that hunt kiwi elsewhere. The settlement of Oban clusters around Half Moon Bay, its 400 residents operating on island time, where scheduled events happen eventually. The island's Maori name, Rakiura, means glowing skies, referring to spectacular auroras visible from southern beaches and sunsets that paint the sky impossible colors. Mutton birds nest in millions here, their burrows so numerous that walking off track risks breaking through into underground nurseries. The surrounding waters host great white sharks that patrol seal colonies, their presence marked by nervous behavior among the pinnipeds. Dense temperate rainforest covers most of the island, trees growing in soil created by their own ancestors, some Rimu and Rata trees over 800 years old. The island has more kilometers of coastline than roads, accessible only by boat or multi-day hiking tracks. Weather arrives unannounced from Antarctica, 4 seasons possible in one day, residents adapting to meteorological chaos as normal life. The Azores archipelago balances atop the junction of 3 tectonic plates, North American, Eurasian, and African, making these 9 Portuguese islands some of Earth's most geologically active real estate. The islands exist because this triple junction creates volcanoes, hot springs, and fumaroles, the Earth literally building land where 3 pieces of planetary puzzle meet. Hydrangeas, introduced as ornamental plants, escaped cultivation and now line roads with blue and pink walls during summer, invasive beauty that defines the landscape. The islands sit in the middle of the Atlantic, 400 kilometers from Europe, 900 from North America, perfectly positioned to be inconvenient to everywhere. This isolation created unique ecosystems. The Azores bullfinch exists only here, evolved from mainland finches blown off course. Sperm whales feed in underwater canyons just offshore, former whaling grounds now whale-watching destinations. The Gulf Stream moderates temperatures, creating eternal spring where tropical plants grow beside species from temperate zones. Volcanic soil fertility produces everything from pineapples and greenhouses to tea plantations, Europe's only commercial tea production. São Miguel's Sete Cidades. Caldera contains 2 lakes, one blue, one green, legend claiming they're tears from separated lovers, science explaining it as light refraction at different depths. The islands continue spreading apart millimeters annually, the Atlantic Ocean slowly widening. Cape Verde hovers off West Africa's coast, receiving Saharan dust storms that travel 2,700 kilometers across the Atlantic Ocean, sometimes arriving in such quantities that visibility drops to 100 meters and airports close. This dust, called bruma seca locally, carries minerals that should fertilize soil, but Cape Verde remains desperately dry, rain so rare that some islands go years without significant precipitation. The archipelago exists where the Sahel meets the sea, desert conditions on volcanic islands surrounded by water they cannot drink. Desalination plants provide most fresh water, making Cape Verde dependent on technology for survival. The dust storms bring more than sand. They carry microorganisms, including pathogens that affect coral reefs in the Caribbean after crossing the entire Atlantic. Musical traditions here blend West African, Portuguese, and Brazilian influences, creating morna, melancholic songs about separation and longing, perfect expression for islands that exist between continents. No two islands look alike, some black with fresh lava, others white with sand blown from Africa, others red with oxidized iron. The islands mark the Atlantic slave trade's last African stop, ships loading human cargo here for the Middle Passage. Today, more Cape Verdeans live abroad than on the islands, remittances keeping the economy afloat, another kind of dust crossing oceans to sustain life. Fernando de Noronha rises from the Atlantic Ocean 350 kilometers off Brazil's coast, limiting visitors to 420 tourists daily through an environmental preservation tax that costs more than many hotel rooms. This volcanic archipelago of 21 islands supports the largest concentration of tropical seabirds in the western Atlantic, their guano having painted cliff faces white over millennia. The main island's beaches change personality with the seasons, gentle and clear from August to February, when seas calm, violent and turbulent, from March to July, when swells arrive from African storms thousands of miles away. Spinner dolphins gather here in pods of thousands, using the bay as a bedroom, resting during daylight before heading to deep waters to hunt at night. The island served as a prison for political dissidents during Brazil's military dictatorship, isolation being the ultimate punishment. Now that same isolation protects endemic species like the Norona skink and Norona vireo, found nowhere else on Earth. Diving here reveals underwater visibility exceeding 50 meters, volcanic pinnacles rising from depths where hammerhead sharks patrol in formations that seem choreographed. Every visitor must pay the environmental tax for each day of their stay, funding conservation efforts that have made this one of Brazil's most pristine marine ecosystems, where human presence is carefully measured against nature's tolerance. São Tomé and Príncipe straddle the equator in the Gulf of Guinea, with Ilhéu das Rolas, island marking 0 degrees latitude so precisely that you can stand with 1 foot in each hemisphere. These volcanic islands, Africa's second smallest nation, emerged from the ocean floor through eruptions that built peaks reaching 2,024 meters, their slopes covered in coffee and cocoa plantations that once made this the world's largest cocoa producer. The islands were uninhabited when Portuguese explorers discovered them in 1470, making them one of the few places on Earth where human impact can be measured from its absolute beginning. Endemic birds here include the world's largest sunbird and smallest ibis, evolution experimenting with size on these isolated laboratories. Obo National Park preserves primordial rainforest where trees grow in volcanic soil, so rich that fallen trunks decompose within months, nutrients racing back into the living forest. Portuguese Creole languages developed differently on each island despite their proximity. Linguistic evolution visible within a single nation. Annual rainfall reaches 7,000 millimeters in the mountains, while coastal areas receive a tenth of that, creating multiple climate zones within spaces you can walk across in hours. The ocean around the islands drops to abyssal depths within sight of shore, whales feeding where the continental shelf plunges into darkness. The Vestmannaeyjar Islands off Iceland's south coast doubled their land area on January 23, 1973, when Eldfell volcano began erupting in someone's backyard, eventually adding 2.24 square kilometers of new land to Heimaey Island. The eruption started with a fissure opening just 200 meters from the town center, forcing evacuation of 5,300 residents within hours as lava fountains shot 150 meters skyward. For 5 months, lava and ash buried 400 homes, but islanders fought back with seawater, pumping millions of gallons onto the advancing lava to cool and redirect it, saving their harbor in what became the first successful attempt to control lava flow. Today, houses remain half buried in volcanic ash, their roofs at ground level, creating a Pompeii-like museum of 1970s domestic life. The new land still radiates heat in places, residents baking bread in buried pots using volcanic warmth. Puffins nest in the millions here, their burrows covering cliffsides so densely that walking requires checking each footstep. Young puffins, confused by town lights during their first flight to sea, crash land in streets where children collect them in boxes and release them at the shore, a tradition called Puffling Patrol. The island's isolation preserved medieval Icelandic language patterns lost on the mainland. Linguists studying here to understand how Icelandic sounded centuries ago. Ascension Island exists as a British colonial remnant in the South Atlantic, where everyone living requires government permission and employment contract, creating a society with no indigenous population, no permanent residents, only temporary workers. This volcanic peak rises from the mid-Atlantic ridge, discovered uninhabited in 1503, and remaining so until Britain garrisoned it in 1815 to guard Napoleon on nearby St. Helena. Green Mountain, the island's 859-meter peak, demonstrates terraforming before the word existed. Charles Darwin suggested introducing plants to create a cloud forest, and Joseph Hooker implemented the plan, importing species from around the world. Today, bamboo from Asia grows beside eucalyptus from Australia and pine from Europe, an artificial ecosystem that generates its own rainfall on an island that was originally desert. Green sea turtles travel 2,000 kilometers from Brazil to nest on the island's beaches, one of nature's longest migrations to breeding grounds, their navigation method still mysterious to science. The BBC Atlantic Relay Station broadcasts from here, shortwave radio signals bouncing off the ionosphere to reach Africa and South America. American military bases occupy large sections, making this British territory feel more American than British. No one is born here. No one dies here naturally. No one retires here. It's a working island where existence depends on employment. The Cocos Islands float in the Indian Ocean as Australia's most remote territory, where 600 people speak Cocos Malay, a unique dialect that developed over 150 years of isolation, mixing Malay with English in patterns found nowhere else. These 27 coral islands, only 2 inhabited, were uninhabited when discovered, but became a feudal kingdom when John Clunies Ross established a copra plantation using Malay workers in 1827, his family ruling as Kings of Cocos until Australia purchased the islands in 1978. The Cocos Malay people, descendants of those workers, maintain traditions that vanished elsewhere. Their Jukong boats, wedding ceremonies, and foods preserve 19th century Malay culture frozen by isolation. The islands sit atop a seamount that rises 5,000 meters from the ocean floor, only the top 5 meters breaking the surface. coral growing just fast enough to match sea level rise. During World War II, the islands served as a refueling stop for flights between Australia and Ceylon. Concrete foundations of fuel, tanks still visible. The lagoon encompasses 190 square kilometers, larger than the land area by factor of 10, sheltered water where blacktip reef sharks patrol in such numbers that swimming requires checking for fins. Coconut crabs here grow to 4 kilograms, climbing palm trees at night to cut down coconuts, their claws strong enough to crack the shells. Norfolk Island's endemic pines grow nowhere else naturally. These perfectly symmetrical trees reaching 60 meters tall, their branches forming precise whorls that architects use as inspiration for building designs. Captain Cook named them pines, though they're actually araucarias, related to monkey puzzle trees. Their straight trunks so valued for ship masts that they nearly went extinct. The island served as a twice-abandoned penal colony, first for the worst convicts from Australia, conditions so brutal that prisoners would murder each other to be hanged and escape the suffering. Descendants of bounty mutineers relocated here from overcrowded Pitcairn Island in 1856, their Norfolk dialect mixing 18th century English with Tahitian, creating phrases like, "What away you?" for, "How are you?" The island's isolation created unique species: the Norfolk Island kaka parrot, the Norfolk Island pigeon, the Norfolk Island owl, all extinct within decades of human arrival. Stone buildings from the penal era remain, cells where prisoners carved counting marks into walls, solitary confinement chambers where men went insane from silence. The pines continue growing perfectly vertical regardless of wind, their seeds spiraling down like helicopters, each tree producing thousands, though only a few will find the precise conditions needed to germinate. Today's residents, many still bearing bounty mutineer surnames, maintain careful genealogies to avoid inbreeding in their small population. Macquarie Island sits precisely halfway between New Zealand and Antarctica, the only place on Earth where rocks from the planet's mantle sit above sea level, exposed when oceanic crust was thrust upward through tectonic collision. This 34-kilometer-long sliver of rock provides scientists a window into Earth's interior without drilling. Mantle rocks usually buried under 30 kilometers of crust, here accessible by simply walking. Royal penguins breed nowhere else, 850,000 pairs returning annually to the exact beaches where they hatched, creating colonies so dense that from distance they look like flowing rivers of birds. The island had no land mammals until sealers introduced rabbits for food, which multiplied until they literally ate the island bare, erosion accelerating as vegetation disappeared. Cats introduced to control rabbits instead decimated seabirds, rats from shipwrecks ate eggs, and the ecosystem collapsed until a 7-year eradication program removed every invasive mammal by 2014. Elephant seals breed in such numbers that beaches disappear under tons of blubber, bulls fighting with such violence that pups are often crushed. The Macquarie Island cushion plant, growing 1 millimeter annually, forms rock-hard mounds that can be 50 years old, though only fist-sized. Weather arrives from Antarctica without warning, 300 days of precipitation annually, winds that average 50 kilometers per hour, making this one of Earth's most consistently miserable climates for humans, but perfect for sub-Antarctic wildlife. The dry Tortugas, 70 miles west of Key West, receive 70 inches of rain annually, yet have no fresh water, every drop draining immediately through porous coral into the sea. Fort Jefferson, built on Garden Key, represents America's largest masonry structure. 16 million bricks assembled on a coral reef to guard shipping lanes that proved strategically irrelevant. The fort never fired a shot in anger, serving instead as a prison, where Dr. Samuel Mudd was held for treating John Wilkes Booth's broken leg after Lincoln's assassination. The islands take their name from the tortugas, turtles, that nested here and the warning that they were dry, lacking fresh water despite surrounding ocean. Frigate birds nest here though they cannot waterproof their feathers, forced to steal food from other birds rather than diving. Aerial pirates that never touch the sea. The surrounding waters contain the least disturbed coral reefs in the Caribbean, protected by isolation and strong currents that discourage casual visitors. Shipwrecks litter the seafloor, vessels that discovered these low islands too late, their ballast stones now incorporated into the reef structure. During full moons, massive spawning events occur when coral simultaneously release eggs and sperm, the water becoming cloudy with future reefs. Rangers stationed here must bring all water from the mainland, living on rain catchment and careful rationing. Clipperton Island belongs to France despite sitting 1,080 kilometers from any other land in the Pacific Ocean, a ring of coral around a lagoon that gradually turned from salt to fresh water as rain accumulated over centuries. The island's only inhabitants are millions of land crabs and seabirds, though it briefly hosted a guano mining colony that ended in tragedy when supply ships stopped arriving, the last survivors resorting to cannibalism before rescue. The crabs, bright orange and numbered in millions, have no predators except each other, creating a society based entirely on size. Booby birds nest on the ground, having never evolved fear of land predators because none existed until humans briefly introduced pigs, which descendants of the survivors eliminated. The lagoon, completely enclosed by land, contains species that evolved from marine ancestors trapped when the atoll completely closed, evolution caught in the act of creating freshwater fish from saltwater stock. France maintains sovereignty through occasional naval visits, sailors raising the flag on an island no French citizen wants to inhabit. Coconut palms introduced by humans provide the only shade, their fronds clicking with crabs that climb them at night. The island's isolation makes it valuable for monitoring trans-Pacific drug smuggling, automated systems recording passing vessels. Scientists visiting must bring everything, including water, as the freshwater lagoon remains too contaminated with bird droppings to drink safely. Palmyra Atoll transforms twice daily as tides connect and separate its lagoons, creating and destroying islands on a 12-hour cycle, geography with a schedule. This uninhabited atoll, 1,600 kilometers south of Hawaii, consists of 50 islets that merge and divide with tidal flow, sometimes one island, sometimes many. The atoll served as a World War II naval air station, runways built on coral fill still visible, though jungle reclaims them. Million-dollar yachts occasionally disappear here, the Palmyra curse claiming vessels and crews in circumstances that remain unexplained. Coast Guard finding abandoned boats with no sign of occupants. Coconut crabs here exhibit gigantism, growing larger than anywhere else, possibly due to abundant food and no predators. The lagoons host blacktip reef sharks in such density that water appears to boil when fish schools enter. Hundreds of sharks creating feeding frenzies visible from shore. Rain falls almost daily, 175 inches annually, yet the coral substrate means no fresh water accumulates, except in artificial catchments. The Nature Conservancy manages it as a research station, scientists studying pristine reef ecosystems, though they must cope with millions of rats descended from wartime introductions. Sooty terns nest in such numbers that their cries create constant noise approaching industrial levels, researchers wearing ear protection. The atoll continues growing, coral adding millimeters annually to structures that took millennia to build. Wake Island consists of 3 coral islets, Wake, Wilkes, and Peel, forming a V shape around a lagoon containing rusted remains from World War II's Pacific Theater. The atoll totals just 6.5 square kilometers, but played an outsized role in history, Japanese forces capturing it after fierce resistance. In December 1941, American defenders holding out for 16 days despite overwhelming odds. The lagoon contains submerged aircraft, sunken vessels, and unexploded ordnance from battles fought 80 years ago, metal slowly becoming reef structure as coral claims war machines. No indigenous population ever existed here, the island too remote and resourceless to support permanent habitation without supply chains. Today, American military contractors maintain facilities for missile defense and emergency aircraft landings, the population fluctuating between 100 and 200 depending on mission requirements. Seabirds nest everywhere except the active runway, their populations recovering from near extinction during the war, when starving soldiers ate everything. The island receives supplies by air and quarterly cargo ships, existing entirely through logistics that cost millions annually to maintain strategic value. Hermit crabs occupy abandoned shells from species that don't live here, shells that arrived as decorations or in cargo, creating an economy of borrowed homes. The coral runway, built by prisoners of war under brutal conditions, still serves aircraft, bones of builders literally part of the foundation. The Pribilof Islands emerge from the Bering Sea, hosting 2.5 million seabirds and nearly 1 million fur seals on just 200 square kilometers of volcanic rock. These islands, discovered uninhabited by Russians seeking fur seals, became killing grounds where millions of seals died for fashion until protection began in 1911. Aleut peoples, forcibly relocated here to harvest seals, developed a culture shaped by isolation and fog that shrouds the island's 200 days annually. The seabird colonies create cliffs that appear alive, every ledge occupied by murres, auklets, puffins, and kittiwakes, whose combined cries drown out conversation. Northern fur seals arrive each summer in numbers that transform beaches into writhing masses of flesh, bulls fighting for territory, while cows give birth to pups conceived the previous year. The islands sit at the edge of seasonal pack ice, seals navigating through leads and pressure ridges to reach breeding grounds their ancestors have used for millennia. Wind here averages 35 kilometers per hour year-round, shaped the volcanic cones into smooth profiles, every sharp edge worn away. During World War II, Japanese forces occupied one island briefly, the only American soil occupied during the war besides Attu and Kiska. Today's Aleut population maintains subsistence hunting rights, their harvest methods unchanged for generations, though the market for fur disappeared decades ago. The surrounding waters rank among Earth's most productive, upwellings supporting the food web. Heard Island contains Big Ben, Australia's only active volcano, despite sitting 4,100 kilometers from the mainland in the Southern Ocean's furious waters. This volcano rises 2,745 meters directly from the sea, its summit usually hidden in clouds that it helps create by forcing moisture-laden air upward into freezing altitudes. The island remains 80% glaciated, though glaciers retreat annually, exposing land unseen for millennia, virgin territory for colonization by mosses and lichens. Elephant seals and fur seals breed on beaches that exist only because volcanic heat melts glacier faces, creating rare, ice-free zones. No humans live here. Visits require months of planning and ships capable of handling seas that regularly produce 20-meter waves. The volcano erupts frequently but gently, lava flows meeting glaciers and steam explosions that reshape the island's topography constantly. Endemic species include the Heard Island cormorant and Kerguelen cabbage, organisms that evolved to survive in one of Earth's most isolated locations. Australian scientists visit occasionally, finding new lava flows, changed coastlines, and species arriving on ocean currents or bird feet. The island grows through eruptions, while simultaneously shrinking through erosion, its existence a balance between creation and destruction. Sound travels impossibly far here. The volcano's rumbling can be heard on ships 50 kilometers away on calm days, though calm days happen perhaps twice yearly. The Crozet Islands scatter across the southern Indian Ocean, hosting more penguins per square kilometer than anywhere on Earth, with 2 million breeding pairs crammed into 352 square kilometers of subantarctic wilderness. 4 species of penguins breed here: king, macaroni, rockhopper, and gentoo. Their colonies so vast that 19th century sailors could smell them from 30 kilometers downwind. The islands exist because a hotspot punctured oceanic crust, building volcanoes that erosion has worn to jagged remnants. France claims these islands, maintaining a research station on Ile de la Possession, where 20 people monitor wildlife and weather. Killer whales here have learned to hunt king penguin chicks by surging onto beaches, grabbing prey, then sliding back into the sea, behavior documented nowhere else. Amsterdam albatrosses, one of the world's rarest birds with fewer than 200 individuals, breed only here and on nearby Amsterdam Island. Ships rarely visit the surrounding seas known for storms that generate waves capable of breaking vessels in half. The island's isolation preserved them from invasive species until recently, when mice arrived and began eating seabird chicks alive, a slow-motion ecological catastrophe. Marion Island nearby grows 5 millimeters annually through volcanic activity, the hotspot still active beneath. Scientists here work in conditions where horizontal rain is normal, where wind chill drops temperatures to -30, despite relatively mild air temperatures. Amsterdam Island in the Indian Ocean maintains wild cattle descended from just 5 animals introduced in 1871, now numbering around 2,000 head that live completely without human management. These cattle evolved rapidly in isolation, developing longer legs for rough terrain, different coloring for camouflage, and behaviors unlike domestic cattle anywhere else. The island, discovered by Dutch explorers but claimed by France, sits alone in vast ocean, its nearest neighbor St. Paul Island, 85 kilometers south. A meteorological station operates here, with 30 residents who share the island with fur seals, elephant seals, and subantarctic birds. The cattle have created their own ecosystem, their grazing patterns shaping plant communities, their paths becoming permanent features in the landscape. Yellow-nosed albatrosses nest on cliffsides where updrafts allow these massive birds to launch into flight, their 3-meter wingspans requiring wind assistance for takeoff. The island's volcanic origin shows in hot springs that maintain 60-degree temperatures year-round, creating microclimates where tropical plants somehow survive at 38 degrees south latitude. Filica trees, found only on Tristan da Cunha and Amsterdam Island, create the only natural forest in the subantarctic region. French scientists study the cattle as an example of rapid evolution, documenting changes that would normally take thousands of years happening in just 150 years of isolation. Peter I Island rises from the Bellingshausen Sea as Antarctica's most remote island, visited by fewer than 600 people since Russian explorer Fabian von Bellingshausen discovered it in 1821. This volcanic island, claimed by Norway though never occupied, sits 450 kilometers from Antarctica in seas that remain ice-locked most years, making approach nearly impossible. The island spans 154 square kilometers, 95% ice-covered, with Lars Christensen Peak rising 1,640 meters through the ice sheet. Those few who have landed describe a landscape of pure hostility. Winds that knock grown men down, temperatures that freeze exposed skin in seconds, visibility that drops to zero without warning. No life exists except for seabirds that nest on rare ice-free cliffs and seals that occasionally haul out on beaches. The island appeared on maps at wrong coordinates for over a century because early explorers could only estimate position in fog and storms. Satellite imagery now reveals features invisible to visitors: subglacial valleys, hidden peaks, ice-covered lakes that may contain isolated ecosystems. The territorial claim remains largely symbolic, Norway unable to maintain even a weather station in such conditions. Some years, pack ice extends so far that the island becomes temporarily part of Antarctica's ice shelf, connected to the continent by frozen sea. Volcanic heat still escapes through fumaroles, creating ice caves filled with toxic gases. Bear Island emerges from the Barents Sea between Norway and Svalbard, receiving 14 meters of snow annually, yet maintaining no permanent ice cover due to the Gulf Stream's warming influence. This meteorological paradox creates a landscape where snow falls almost daily but melts almost immediately, water constantly flowing from melting snow that never accumulates. The island hosts millions of seabirds on vertical cliffs that rise 500 meters from the sea, their guano painting rocks white and fertilizing vegetation that grows impossibly green. Weather station staff, the only inhabitants, endure isolation in one of Europe's stormiest locations, where weather systems from the Arctic and Atlantic collide. The island witnessed one of the Arctic's first commercial extinctions when Russian hunters eliminated the walrus population in the 1600s, bones still scattered on beaches. Coal deposits indicate this Arctic island once sat in tropical latitudes, continental drift carrying it north over millions of years. Polar bears occasionally arrive on ice floes, hence the name, though they cannot survive without seals to hunt and must be tranquilized and relocated. The surrounding waters mark where cold Arctic water meets warm Atlantic currents, creating upwellings that support massive fish populations. Fog shrouds the island 90 days annually, so thick that people have gotten lost walking between buildings 20 meters apart. Elephant Island's shape accidentally resembles an elephant's head when viewed from certain angles, though its name actually derives from elephant seals that breed on its beaches in massive malodorous colonies. This mountainous island off Antarctica became famous as Shackleton's cruise refuge after the Endurance sank, 22 men surviving 137 days under overturned boats waiting for rescue that seemed impossible. The island offers no flat land, mountains rising directly from the sea to 852 meters, glaciers filling valleys between peaks. Chinstrap penguins breed here in colonies of 100,000, their raucous calls echoing off ice cliffs that regularly calve into the sea. The island sits in the Drake Passage's storm track, waves sometimes washing completely over lower portions, explaining why no permanent research station exists, despite its historical significance. Point Wild, where Shackleton's men waited, remains exactly as they left it, too hostile for even lichens to grow. Elephant seals haul out on the same narrow beach, bulls weighing 4 tons fighting for territory, while storms throw spray 30 meters up cliffs. The island appears and disappears in fog and storm, sometimes visible, sometimes vanishing for weeks. Pack ice surrounds it unpredictably, sometimes allowing approach, often forcing ships to stand off for days, waiting for conditions that permit landing. The monument to Shackleton's expedition stands where they camped, though storms regularly knock it down. Campbell Island's megaherbs evolved in an herbivore-free environment, growing leaves up to 50 centimeters across, creating a landscape that seems designed for giants. These massive plants, Campbell Island carrot with flowers like dinner plates, Ross lily with leaves like umbrellas, developed without needing defenses against grazing animals. The island, 700 kilometers south of New Zealand, experiences the Southern Ocean's full fury, yet these plants thrive in constant wind and rain. Introduced sheep destroyed much vegetation before removal in 1991, but megaherbs survived in inaccessible areas and now recolonize former pastures. Royal albatrosses nest here, taking 18 months to raise single chicks, parents flying thousands of kilometers to find food. The island's shape funnels wind through Perseverance Harbor at speeds that literally lift people off their feet. Rata trees grow horizontally, shaped by centuries of westerly gales, their trunks sometimes running along the ground for 10 meters before turning upward. World War II coast watchers stationed here reported weather and watched for German raiders, though isolation proved more dangerous than enemy action. The subantarctic climate means summer temperatures rarely exceed 10 degrees Celsius, winter rarely drops below freezing, eternal autumn that supports unique ecosystems. Archaeological sites reveal Polynesian presence 700 years ago, the southernmost evidence of Polynesian exploration, though they didn't stay in this hostile paradise. The Auckland Islands create more shipwrecks per kilometer of coastline than anywhere else on Earth, earning the grim title Graveyard of the Pacific, with at least 10 documented wrecks in 166 square kilometers. These subantarctic islands, 465 kilometers south of New Zealand, sit directly in the roaring Forties path where storms arrive without warning and cliffs rise from deep water without beaches for survival. The General Grant wrecked here in 1866, carrying gold that has never been recovered despite numerous expeditions, gold fever adding more wrecks to the collection. Survivors from various wrecks lived as castaways for years, depot huts stocked with supplies their only hope, some rescued, others dying, waiting for ships that never came. Enderby Island hosts yellow-eyed penguins, and Hooker's sea lions found nowhere else, species that barely survived hunting that eliminated them from mainland New Zealand. The island's rata forests flower simultaneously every few years, turning entire hillsides crimson in unpredictable displays that may relate to climate patterns scientists don't understand. Cattle and pigs introduced for castaways' survival went feral, eliminated only recently after destroying unique vegetation. The Auckland Island rail evolved flightlessness here, the world's smallest flightless bird, surviving because no land predators existed. Weather stations operated briefly but failed, the climate too severe for equipment, isolation too extreme for staff. Today, only scientists visit, studying ecosystems that exist nowhere else. Antipodes Islands sit at the precise opposite point on Earth from Greenwich, England, the only land directly antipodal to the prime meridian, a geographical coincidence that seems too perfect for chance. These uninhabited New Zealand islands, 860 kilometers southeast of the mainland, host more seabirds per square meter than almost anywhere, creating a cacophony that early explorers described as maddening. Erect-crested penguins breed nowhere else on Earth, their yellow eyebrows giving them a perpetually surprised expression as they navigate cliffs that would challenge mountain goats. The islands remained undiscovered until 1800, missed by centuries of Pacific navigation, too far south for trade routes, too small to notice unless you're looking. Mice, accidentally introduced from a shipwreck, became the island's only mammals, evolving into a distinct subspecies within just 100 years. evolution visible in human timescales. The surrounding waters drop to abyssal depths within sight of shore, creating upwellings that support the massive seabird colonies. Castaway depots established here saved lives, including 11 survivors from the ship Spirit of the Dawn, who lived for 87 days on raw mollusks and seabird eggs. The main island's plateau, covered in tussock grass, creates an alien landscape where wind has worn paths between grass clumps that tower over human height, natural mazes that disorient even experienced explorers. Trindade Island rises from the Atlantic as Brazil's most remote territory, 200 kilometers from the mainland, where Britain and Brazil once disputed ownership until Brazil settled it with a permanent garrison that continues today. The island's volcanic peaks reach 620 meters, creating their own weather patterns that differ completely between windward and leeward sides, rainforest meeting desert within a few kilometers walk. Giant land crabs here grow to unusual sizes, their population explosion following the extinction of seabirds that once controlled their numbers, an ecosystem tipped into new balance. Portuguese sailors released goats in 1700 as food for future castaways, but they multiplied and destroyed vegetation until elimination in 2004, the island slowly recovering its green. The surrounding waters host breeding humpback whales that sing complex songs, using the island's underwater slopes as an amphitheater that amplifies their calls across ocean basins. Tree ferns that should have gone extinct survived in ravines where goats couldn't reach, Jurassic-looking plants that seem misplaced in time. The Brazilian Navy maintains the island's only settlement, 32 personnel rotating through year-long assignments, their primary duty simply maintaining sovereignty. Volcanic activity continues underwater, new seamounts growing that may eventually become islands, the archipelago still forming. Edmund Halley, of comet fame, claimed the island for Britain in 1700, but Portugal's prior claim prevailed through centuries of diplomatic argument. Marion Island receives 2,400 millimeters of precipitation annually spread across 320 days, making it one of Earth's wettest places despite sitting in the sub-Antarctic, where most moisture falls as snow. This South African territory, together with nearby Prince Edward Island, rises from the Indian Ocean atop a volcanic hotspot that still occasionally rumbles with minor earthquakes. King penguins breed here in colonies of 200,000 pairs, their chicks taking 14 months to fledge, meaning the colony never empties, always containing birds at various life stages. The island's mouse problem began with a single pregnant female in 1949, her descendants now numbering millions, eating seabird chicks alive in attacks that horrify researchers. Wandering albatrosses nest on the boggy plains, birds that may live 60 years and fly 10 million kilometers in their lifetimes, returning to the exact same nest site decade after decade. The weather station here records winds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour, instruments occasionally ripped from mountings by gusts that arrive without warning. Marion grows 5 millimeters annually as volcanic activity continues beneath the island, imperceptibly rising from the sea. Elephant seals breed on beaches that exist only because volcanic heat prevents complete freezing, warmth seeping through sand. The island's shape channels wind through valleys at speeds that create horizontal waterfalls, water blown sideways off cliffs. Guff Island harbors evolutionary horror in the form of mice that evolved into seabird predators, growing 50% larger than their ancestors and hunting in packs that eat albatross chicks alive. This British territory in the South Atlantic, 2,700 kilometers from Africa, became a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its pristine ecosystem, not knowing that mice from sealing vessels had already begun destroying it. The mice attack chicks 300 times their weight, eating them slowly over days while parents watch helplessly. evolution having provided no defense against mammals on this mammal-free island. Tristan albatrosses breed only here, their population declining toward extinction as mice kill 80% of chicks annually, a catastrophe unfolding in slow motion. The island rises to 9-10 meters, high enough to snag clouds that drop 3,400 millimeters of rain annually, creating waterfalls that plunge directly into the ocean. Rockhopper penguins navigate these cliffs with astounding agility, hopping up vertical faces that would challenge technical climbers. The island's isolation preserved unique plants including tree ferns and island trees found nowhere else, vegetation that survived ice ages here while disappearing from continents. Weather arrives from Antarctica without warning, storms that have wrecked fully modern vessels, their crews joining centuries of bones on beaches accessible only to seabirds and seals. Inaccessible Island lives up perfectly to its name, surrounded entirely by cliffs rising 300 meters from the sea, with only one landing point, usable perhaps 100 days per year, when swells permit. This shield volcano in the South Atlantic covers just 14 square kilometers, the smallest island, supporting a permanent population of land birds. The Inaccessible Island Rail, the world's smallest flightless bird. Only about 80 people have ever set foot here since discovery in 1656, fewer than have climbed Everest, the combination of location and terrain defeating most attempts. The island's plateau, reached by climbing cliffs that would challenge professional mountaineers, contains bog pools where endemic invertebrates evolved, including the world's smallest flightless moth. Tussock grass grows 3 meters tall, creating tunnels where rails run like mice, their population of 8,000 birds invisible unless you know where to look. Northern rockhopper penguins breed here in colonies that require approaching through surf that regularly kills seals, waves that compress and explode against cliffs, with force that registers on seismographs. The island formed only 3 million years ago, young by geological standards, its rocks still sharp, unweathered by the erosion that has softened older islands. 2 Stoltenhoff brothers lived here for 2 years, attempting to harvest seal skins, nearly dying from scurvy before rescue, their shelter foundations still visible. The South Sandwich Islands arc through the Scotia Sea as 11 volcanic islands where Mount Belinda has erupted continuously since 2001, warming surrounded ice enough to create the archipelago's first recorded ice-free ground. These islands, claimed by Britain but desired by Argentina, sit where the South American plate overrides the South Sandwich Plate, creating one of Earth's most active volcanic zones in its most hostile environment. Zavodovsky Island hosts 2 million chinstrap penguins, the world's largest penguin colony, their guano visible from space as a brown stain on white volcanic slopes. The islands exist in permanent storm, situated where Antarctic and Atlantic weather systems collide, creating conditions that prevent any permanent human presence despite territorial claims. Saunders Island's Mount Michael maintains a lava lake in its crater, one of only 8 persistent lava lakes on Earth, discovered only through satellite imagery as no one has climbed the volcano. Pack ice surrounds the islands 8 months annually, seals and penguins navigating leads between flows to reach breeding grounds. The volcanic heat creates bizarre ice formations, towers, caves, and bridges, where steam freezes instantly upon meeting Antarctic air. Southern Thule, the archipelago's southernmost point, marks where several tectonic plates meet, earthquakes common as Earth rearranges itself beneath ice and storm. Willis Island emerges from the Coral Sea as Australia's most remote weather station. A coral cay just 500 meters long and 150 meters wide, staffed by 4 meteorologists who endure 6-month rotations in complete isolation. The island sits atop a seamount that rises 2,000 meters from the ocean floor, only the top few meters breaking the surface, coral growing just fast enough to match sea level rise. Cyclones pass directly over the island regularly, staff sheltering in reinforced bunkers while winds exceed 250 kilometers per hour. The station specifically positioned to observe cyclones from within. Green turtles nest here, despite the limited beach, females returning to the exact spot where they hatched decades earlier, navigating across thousands of ocean kilometers to find this speck of sand. The island shrinks during king tides when waves wash completely across, staff buildings raised on stilts to survive overwash events. No fresh water exists naturally. Rain collection and reverse osmosis provide drinking water for the small crew. Seabirds nest in such density that walking requires checking each step, their guano requiring daily cleaning from equipment. The weather radar here provides early warning for Australia's east coast, detecting systems 400 kilometers away. Supply ships visit quarterly, weather permitting, sometimes waiting weeks for conditions calm enough to unload. The island existing entirely through human determination to maintain this remote outpost. The Balleny Islands emerge from the Southern Ocean, so rarely visited that some remain unexplored since discovery in 1839. Pack ice and weather combining to create near-perfect inaccessibility. These volcanic islands stretch 160 kilometers along the Antarctic Circle, marking where the Pacific and Antarctic plates meet, occasional earthquakes suggesting continuing geological activity. Young Island erupted in 1839 during its discovery, sailors watching lava pour into the sea. Though no eruption has been witnessed since, the island's usually hidden in fog and storm. Fewer than 10 successful landings have occurred in 180 years, each expedition finding species new to science, evolution continuing in isolation so complete that each island hosts unique subspecies. Adelie and chinstrap penguins breed on ice-free slopes heated by volcanic warmth, the only source of bare ground in this frozen archipelago. The islands appear and disappear in fog so thick that ships have nearly collided with cliffs, radar sometimes failing in the ice crystal-filled air. Orcas patrol the waters between islands, having learned that leopard seals chase penguins into narrow channels where escape becomes impossible. Sturge Island, the largest at 30 kilometers long, has mountains reaching 1,524 meters. Their peaks never climbed, their slopes unmapped. The surrounding sea ice breaks and reforms unpredictably, sometimes opening leads that allow approach, usually remaining locked solid. Scott Island sits so far into Antarctica's pack ice that many maps show it in the wrong location by up to 1 kilometer, its position uncertain until GPS satellites finally fixed its coordinates. This tiny volcanic remnant, barely 400 meters long, rises from the Ross Sea as a curved blade of rock, its shape constantly modified by waves that freeze as they strike. The island has been visited fewer than 20 times since discovery in 1902, most expeditions unable to land due to ice, swells, or both. Emperor penguins were discovered breeding here in 1964, the first colony found outside Antarctica proper, birds somehow navigating to this speck through the polar night. The island shrinks annually, erosion claiming more rock than volcanic activity can replace, its existence temporary on geological timescales. Satellite imagery reveals underwater shelves extending from the island, suggesting it was once much larger, perhaps connected to other seamounts now submerged. No vegetation grows here, not even lichens, the climate too severe for any plant life, making this possibly Earth's most barren land. Weather conditions prevent helicopter landings, access only possible by ship during the brief window when pack ice breaks up. but before autumn storms arrive. The island serves as a navigation hazard, appearing suddenly from fog, several ships having reported near collisions with cliffs that materialized from whiteness. McDonald Islands doubled in size during the 1990s through volcanic eruptions, growing from 1 to 2.5 square kilometers, while humans watched via satellite, geology happening in real time. These Australian islands, 4,000 kilometers southwest of Perth, neighbor Heard Island, but remained even less visited, their first recorded landing occurring only in 1971. The main island's volcano, after 75,000 years of dormancy, suddenly reactivated in 1992, building new land that connects previously separate islets. Macaroni penguins colonized the new terrain within years, demonstrating nature's ability to exploit opportunity. The islands sit on the Kerguelen Plateau, a submerged continent-sized feature that would be Earth's smallest continent if sea levels dropped 500 meters. Elephant seals breed on beaches that didn't exist 30 years ago, volcanic sand still warm beneath their bodies. The eruptions continue intermittently, lava flows reaching the sea and exploding in steam clouds visible from Heard Island, 44 kilometers away. No plants grew here before the eruptions, but spores arriving on wind have established moss communities on new volcanic soil, primary succession observable in human timescales. The Australian government monitors the islands by satellite, unable to maintain permanent presence in seas that generate 20-meter waves routinely. Future eruptions could double the island's size again or destroy them entirely, their existence balanced on geological probability. Jarvis Island accumulates guano deposits up to 20 meters thick, millions of years of bird droppings compressed into rock-like phosphate that once made this tiny Pacific island valuable enough to fight over. The United States claimed this uninhabited coral island in 1856 under the Guano Act, mining operations removing 300,000 tons of fertilizer before exhaustion in 1879. Today, no fresh water exists on the island's 4.5 square kilometers, every drop of rain immediately absorbed by coral sand or evaporated in equatorial heat. Sooty terns nest here in millions, their colonies so dense that ground temperature rises from metabolic heat, creating thermal updrafts birds use for effortless flight. The island sits atop a seamount rising 3,000 meters from the ocean floor, coral growth barely keeping pace with erosion, the island gradually shrinking. Green sea turtles nest on beaches despite the lack of vegetation, hatchlings racing to water through gauntlets of seabirds. The surrounding waters contain some of Earth's highest marine biodiversity, the equatorial location and upwelling creating perfect conditions. Rats, accidentally introduced, were eliminated in 1990 after decimating seabird populations, colonies now recovering. The island generates its own climate, bird colonies creating ammonia clouds that sometimes make breathing difficult, natural chemical warfare protecting nests from predators that never evolved here. Howland Island marks where Amelia Earhart intended to refuel during her 1937 round-the-world flight, never arriving at this 1.6-kilometer-long coral island that rises just 6 meters above sea level. The airstrip built for her landing remains visible, though sand and vegetation gradually reclaim it, erasing evidence of aviation's greatest mystery. This uninhabited American territory sits almost exactly on the equator, experiencing 12-hour days year-round, no seasons, only variations in rainfall. Guano mining in the 1800s stripped the island to bedrock in places, scars still visible where millions of years of accumulation vanished in decades. The island lacks fresh water, trees, or any natural resources beyond the exhausted guano. Yet seabirds continue arriving in thousands, rebuilding deposits grain by grain. Japanese forces attacked the island December 8, 1941, one day after Pearl Harbor, due to the international dateline, killing colonists attempting to establish American presence. The Earhart Light, a beacon built after her disappearance, stood until bombed in World War II, its ruins now a day roost for frigate birds. Coast Guard maintains an automatic beacon here, powered by solar panels that frequently require cleaning of bird droppings. The island shrinks with each storm, coral unable to grow fast enough to offset erosion, eventually destined to disappear beneath waves that already wash across during high tides. Baker Island sits just 25 kilometers south of the equator, but uses UTC 12 time, making it Earth's last place to experience each calendar day, yesterday lasting longer here than anywhere else. This uninhabited atoll, claimed by the United States, spans just 2.1 square kilometers of coral and sand that never rises more than 8 meters above sea level. The island's isolation creates a time capsule of failed colonization, ruins of settlements from the 1930s when America tried establishing permanent presence, abandoned buildings now home to hermit crabs. No rain fell here for 3 years during the 1950s, yet when storms arrive, they drop 100 millimeters in hours, flooding the entire island before draining through porous coral. Lesser frigate birds nest in the few bushes that survive on rainfall, averaging just 450 millimeters annually, among Earth's driest tropical locations. The surrounding reef extends 5 kilometers offshore, ships giving wide berth to waters that hide coral heads capable of tearing steel hulls. A cemetery contains colonists who died trying to establish American sovereignty, their graves marked by coral slabs. Phosphate mining destroyed most vegetation, the island still recovering after 150 years, succession proceeding at tropical speeds. Green sea turtles and hawksbill turtles nest on beaches they've used since before humans knew these islands existed. Kingman Reef emerges above water only at low tide, disappearing completely during high tide twice daily, an island that exists part-time. This Pacific atoll, claimed by the United States, consists of coral growing atop a seamount, maintaining perfect pace with sea level for thousands of years. The reef encloses a lagoon 60 square kilometers in area, but maximum depth of only 1 meter, too shallow for ships, but perfect for sharks that patrol in hundreds. During extreme low tides, the reef becomes walkable, revealing tide pools containing species that exist in no other ecosystem, evolution trapped in temporary pools. Giant clams here grow to unusual sizes, some over 100 years old, their mantles creating miniature ecosystems for fish that never venture beyond. The reef generates breaking waves visible from 20 kilometers away, white water marking its position when the reef itself remains invisible beneath the surface. No vegetation grows on the emergent portions, not even algae surviving the twice-daily submersion and exposure. Shipwrecks litter the reef, vessels that discovered it too late, their remains now incorporated into the coral structure. The lagoon water temperature varies 10 degrees between surface and bottom despite the shallow depth, thermoclines creating distinct layers in just 1 meter of water. Seabirds rest on exposed coral during low tide, taking flight as rising water reclaims their temporary perches. Johnston Atoll exists as a monument to human manipulation of geography, expanded from 46 to 280 hectares through coral dredging and filling, then contaminated by nuclear testing and chemical weapons disposal. The United States conducted 12 atmospheric nuclear tests here in the 1960s, radiation levels still detectable in soil and groundwater. Chemical weapons destroyed here included nerve agents and mustard gas, the incinerator running for years to eliminate Cold War arsenals. The atoll now serves as a national wildlife refuge, though humans cannot safely live here. Radiation and chemical contamination creating an involuntary park. Seabirds nest in millions, apparently unaffected by contamination that would sicken humans, their short lives avoiding long-term radiation effects. The original islands barely rose above sea level, but military construction raised them to 9 meters using coral dredged from the lagoon. Green sea turtles nest on beaches created from nuclear crater debris, life returning to spaces designed for death. The surrounding waters remain pristine, currents dispersing contamination, marine life thriving in the protected zone around the hazardous atoll. Plutonium contamination in the soil has a half-life of 24,000 years, ensuring the atoll remains uninhabitable for geological timescales. Monk seals, among Earth's most endangered mammals, haul out on contaminated beaches, finding safety in human absence. The Salvagens Islands between Madeira and the Canaries host the largest colony of Cory's shearwaters on Earth, 40,000 pairs nesting on islands, Portugal guards with permanent wardens to prevent poaching. These volcanic islands, disputed by Spain but controlled by Portugal since 1438, rise from the ocean as biological treasures surrounded by some of Atlantic's richest fishing grounds. The islands remained uninhabited throughout history, too dry for agriculture, too small for settlement, perfect for seabirds that nest in burrows covering every square meter of soil. Monk seals breed in caves here, one of the last Mediterranean monk seal populations, perhaps 40 individuals surviving from millions that once inhabited the Mediterranean. The islands receive less than 200 millimeters of rain annually, vegetation consisting of succulents that survive on moisture from sea fog. Rabbits introduced in the 15th century destroyed much native vegetation before eradication in 2002. The islands slowly recovering. Portuguese wardens live in isolation for months, their primary job preventing illegal fishing and egg collection. The surrounding waters drop to 3,000 meters within sight of shore, deep-water species approaching closer to land than almost anywhere. Yellow-legged gulls have learned to prey on shearwater chicks, evolution in action as behavioral changes spread through the population. Rockall stands alone in the North Atlantic, a granite pinnacle 25 meters high and 30 meters wide, the last above-water remnant of a microcontinent that sank 55 million years ago. Britain, Ireland, Denmark, and Iceland have all claimed this uninhabitable rock, its ownership mattering only for the fishing and potential oil rights in surrounding waters. The rock cannot sustain human life. Waves wash over it regularly. No fresh water exists. No soil supports even lichens. Yet in 1955, British Marines ceremoniously claimed it, cementing a plaque that waves destroyed within years. An eccentric lived on the rock for 40 days in 1985 to affirm British sovereignty, surviving in a prefabricated shelter bolted to the granite. The nearest land lies 370 kilometers away, making Rockall one of the most isolated above-water features in the North Atlantic. Seabirds avoid it, the constant wave wash making nesting impossible, though they rest briefly during calm weather. The rock shrinks measurably each century, erosion removing granite grain by grain, eventually destined to disappear beneath waves. Legends claim it marks where the last of Atlantis sank, though geology reveals more prosaic origins in continental rifting. Storm waves here reach 29 meters, measured by instruments briefly attached before destruction, some of the highest waves recorded anywhere. Banks Peninsula juts from New Zealand's South Island like a tumor of volcanic rock, formed when two separate shield volcanoes erupted from the seafloor, eventually connecting to the mainland through sediment accumulation. The peninsula's harbors, Lyttelton and Akaroa, fill ancient volcanic craters, the sea having breached crater walls to create perfect natural ports. French colonists arrived at Akaroa in 1840, days after Britain claimed New Zealand, creating the nation's only French settlement. their descendants still speaking French-accented English. Hector's dolphins, the world's smallest dolphins, live only in these waters, fewer than 7,000 individuals surviving, their range shrinking as fishing nets entangle them. The peninsula's radial valleys run like spokes from the volcanic centers, each valley containing unique microclimates, some supporting subtropical plants, while others host subalpine species. Giant's House Garden cascades down hillsides in mosaic sculptures, art attempting to match nature's volcanic drama. The volcanoes died 6 million years ago, but their legacy shapes everything: soil fertility, harbor locations, even weather patterns as mountains force clouds upward. Banks Peninsula tried to become an island, volcanic eruptions building it separately from the mainland, but the Waimakariri River's sediments filled the gap, connecting it against its geological will. Earthquakes regularly remind residents they live on extinct volcanoes. The 2011 Christchurch earthquake's epicenter sitting directly beneath Littleton Harbor. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, sits 3,700 kilometers from Chile in the Pacific Ocean, Earth's most isolated inhabited landmass. Its nearest populated neighbor, Pitcairn Island, 2,075 kilometers away. The island formed from 3 volcanoes that emerged from the Nazca Plate, creating a triangle of land just 163 square kilometers, home to mysteries that archaeology still struggles to explain. Nearly 1,000 moai statues dot the landscape, some weighing 75 tons, carved and somehow transported by a population that never exceeded 15,000 people. The island once supported palm forests, but Polynesian rats ate palm seeds, preventing regeneration, while humans cleared remaining trees, creating ecological collapse by 1600. Without trees for canoes, the population became trapped, unable to leave, society collapsing into cannibalism and warfare, until Europeans arrived to find remnants of a destroyed civilization. Today's 8,000 residents, 60% Polynesian, struggle with water scarcity. No permanent streams exist, rain collection, and one brackish lake their only sources. The quarry at Ranoraraku contains 397 unfinished moai, some 20 meters tall, abandoned mid-carving when society collapsed. Rongorongo script, carved on wooden tablets, remains undeciphered, possibly Polynesia's only indigenous writing system. Chilean sovereignty brought Spanish language and South American connections to people whose ancestors navigated here by reading stars, swells, and bird flights across Earth's emptiest ocean. Greenland, the world's largest island at 216 million square kilometers, exists mostly as an ice sheet up to 3 kilometers thick, actual land buried beneath frozen water that contains 10% of Earth's fresh water. If this ice melted entirely, global sea levels would rise 7 meters, drowning coastal cities worldwide. The weight of ice has pressed the island's center below sea level, creating a bowl shape that would be an inland sea if the ice vanished. Only 10,000 square kilometers remain ice-free, mostly along coasts where 56,000 people live in settlements accessible only by boat, helicopter, or dog sled. The ice sheet creates its own weather, katabatic winds rushing down from the interior at speeds reaching 200 kilometers per hour, temperature dropping 40 degrees in minutes. Vikings named it Greenland as marketing, trying to attract settlers to a land less hospitable than the Iceland they honestly named. The indigenous Inuit arrived from Canada around 1200 CE, their ancestors having tried and failed to colonize Greenland twice before, climate fluctuations making survival impossible. Greenland sharks in surrounding waters live 400 years, Earth's longest-lived vertebrates, swimming so slowly that they seem dormant. The island rises 12 millimeters annually as ice melts, post-glacial rebound lifting land compressed for millennia, geography recovering from ice's weight, Socotra Island emerges from the Arabian Sea as Yemen's strangest province, separated from Arabia for 18 million years, evolving life forms that exist nowhere else on Earth. Dragon's blood trees dominate the landscape, with umbrella-shaped canopies and crimson resin that Romans valued above gold. These trees, which can live 500 years, look like giant umbrellas turned inside out, their bizarre shape adapted to catch moisture from mist. 1/3 of Socotra's 825 plant species exist only here, including the desert rose with its bulbous trunk that stores water for droughts lasting years. The Socotri people speak Socotri, an unwritten language predating Arabic, passed orally through generations on an island where isolation preserved everything. Caves here extend for kilometers, some containing stalagmites taller than buildings, formed when Arabia had monsoons. The Arabian Sea's monsoons bring winds that reverse biannually, isolating the island for months when ships couldn't sail and planes couldn't land. Egyptian vultures here learned to use tools, dropping rocks on ostrich eggs to break them, behavior seen nowhere else. Socotra's coral reefs survived bleaching events that killed reefs worldwide, their isolation perhaps providing resilience. UNESCO declared it a World Heritage Site, recognizing that Socotra preserves biological history elsewhere erased. The island's future remains uncertain as Yemen's civil war occasionally spills over, modernity threatening what 18 million years of isolation preserved. Novaya Zemlya stretches 900 kilometers through the Arctic Ocean, a nuclear wasteland where the Soviet Union detonated 224 nuclear devices, including the Tsar Bomba, the largest nuclear explosion in history. The 50-megaton blast in 1961 shattered windows 900 kilometers away, its mushroom cloud reaching 67 kilometers high, visible from 1,000 kilometers distance. Indigenous Nenets people were relocated before testing began, their ancestral lands becoming a nuclear polygon, where radiation still contaminates soil, water, and ice. Polar bears here show unusual aggression, besieging weather stations, possibly due to radiation effects or climate change driving them from traditional hunting grounds. The island divides the Barents and Kara Seas, its mountains forcing Atlantic moisture to drop on the west, while the east remains desert dry despite Arctic location. Nuclear submarines dumped in surrounding waters leak radiation, creating underwater exclusion zones where fishing is banned. Glaciers cover 40% of the islands, but they're retreating rapidly, exposing land unseen since before human civilization. Birds nesting here carry radioactive particles to other countries, flying contamination spreading across international borders. Russia maintains military bases and conducts nuclear activities, the islands remaining closed to foreigners. Global warming opens Northeast Passage shipping routes past Novaya Zemlya, commercial vessels sailing through waters where nuclear waste creates invisible hazards beneath ice that's disappearing faster than predicted. As we reach the end of our journey through Earth's patient archive of places and phenomena, we've traced the planet's quieter testimonies, from underground fires that outlive civilizations to islands that appear and disappear with the tides, from lakes that kill with a single breath to mountains that grow while we sleep. These facts, accumulated like sediment layers through our hours together, remind us that Earth keeps its own records in languages we're only beginning to understand. We've visited places where time moves differently, where volcanic islands double in size within human memory, where ancient fires burn through centuries, where ice preserves viruses from pandemics that ended before our great-grandparents were born. The planet writes its autobiography in coral atolls and volcanic ash, in parallel sand dunes and impossibly deep trenches, indifferent to whether anyone reads these stories. Geography, as we've seen tonight, is not merely the study of places, but the contemplation of patience itself. Every fact we've explored represents millions of moments of imperceptible change: the millimeter rise of a mountain, the grain-by-grain construction of an island, the slow choreography of continents dancing apart. The Earth continues these processes as you drift towards sleep, adding another layer of sediment, another millimeter of spreading seafloor, another degree of volcanic heat to lakes that shouldn't exist. Thank you for joining us on this measured journey through Earth's quieter truths, these coordinates of patience that mark places most of us will never see but can now carry in our dreams. May your sleep be filled with pink lakes and crystal caves, with rivers that flow beneath rivers and rain that falls upward, with islands born from fire and ice that sings as it melts. The world continues its slow transformations tonight, the Himalayas rising imperceptibly higher, the Atlantic growing wider by the width of a fingernail, volcanic islands building themselves grain by grain from the seafloor. Geography doesn't sleep. It simply moves at a pace that makes our hurried lives seem like brief interruptions in its longer conversation with time. Until we meet again beneath the patient stars, this has been Midnight Geography, mapping the margins of a sleeping world, recording the planet's dreams in stone and water and wind. Rest well, knowing that Earth continues its ancient writing, adding new chapters to stories that began before life itself learned to read them. The geography we've explored tonight will be slightly different tomorrow, minutely, imperceptibly, but genuinely changed, just as you will wake tomorrow slightly changed by the journey we've shared through Earth's most patient places. Good night, and may your dreams be as deep as ocean trenches, as peaceful as polar silence, and as endless as the planet's slow breath.